Good evening, and welcome to Insomniac Theater, where I'll be reading some of my favorite stories, spooky stories that I've collected from the web, from the dark web. This particular one is called Something That Looks Like Former President Jimmy Carter is Stalking Me. I'll see him standing outside some nights, a slouched silhouette that is completely dark aside from white, neatly combed hair that glows like silver fire in the moonlight. He'll usually stand right outside and blankly look into my bedroom window. Some nights he'll rhythmically tap on the glass and speak nonsense like, "There's carpentry for every one of, and you do the presidency. You do the presidency. In this, the Human Rights Center for the Center of Human Carpentry is ultimately human." Every once in a while, I'll hear the front doorknob jingle as he tries to come inside. If he's especially persistent, I'll have to walk over to wherever he's trying to break in and say, "You have my vote." To which he will say more nonsense things, but I have to reiterate that he has my vote until he finally leaves. But he never really leaves. I suppose now I should tell you that the man trying to break in my home is former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. Or more accurately, something that is trying to emulate him. I was just a kid the first time Jimmy came up to me. I was riding my bike to my friend's house as fast as I could. It was supposed to rain that day, and I was trying to beat the weather. I always rode on the sidewalks because being hit by a car was a huge fear of mine. Well, as the rain clouds swelled and darkened, I pedaled harder and more desperately. I had my GameCube and Resident Evil 4 in my bag, so getting caught in the rain was not ideal. Honestly, biking with it when it was supposed to rain was not ideal either, but I was a dumb teenager. I reached a speed that felt like light travel on my bike when something leaped out of the bushes and threw me off my bike. My entire right side was tingling in pain from the road rash. Even though I was in the street, I didn't really care about being hit by a car at that moment. I was worried if my GameCube was okay. I looked around to see where my blue JanSport backpack had landed. I looked back to my bike and I saw a man in a navy blue suit holding my bag by one of the shoulder straps. He was old, well-kempt, and motionless. I thought he was a mannequin at first, which was only exaggerated seeing my backpack sway in his still hand. I knew what Jimmy Carter looked like, but I never thought this could be him. I just thought, hey, this is a guy who looks a little like a former president. His mouth was agape, not like an open smile. It was just open, like he was about to say something, but couldn't think of the words. He had a pin on his lapel, which at first glance would resemble the American flag, but it wasn't. The longer I looked at it, the more it seemed to change. First, it was the American flag, but then it was a blue star with red snakes, then a blue eye with red veins. The temperature began to drop, which reminded me of the rain. I shook off the strangeness and tried to act like the situation wasn't weird. "Hey, thank you for grabbing my bag, sir," I said, reaching towards my bag. Just as I was about to grab one of the shoulder straps, Jimmy took a step back, almost in a teasing way. I gave a nervous laugh, hoping he would reciprocate and acknowledge that was a joke. Instead, his mouth was left emotionlessly open. I reached for my bag again, but Jimmy took another step back. Now halfway in the bushes, my stomach got heavy. I quickly tried to grab the shoulder strap again, but this time Jimmy took another step backwards, now almost in the woods behind the bushes. If I tried to grab the shoulder strap one more time, I would be in the bushes, and for some reason, I felt that was the worst thing I could do right now. Frustrated, I flipped him off and said, "Keep it." I lifted my bike up, got on, and started to pedal away. When I looked back, I saw Jimmy standing on the sidewalk, my bag loosely hanging off one of his fingers, his face unchanged, and instead of his red tie, there was just a solid navy blue. I remember thinking to myself, that was weird, but there's no way his head is backwards. I was at my grandpa's house the second time I saw Jimmy Carter. I visited my grandpa about once a month. We would share a beer and just hang out. I think he always felt especially close to me since I look so much like my dad. My dad died when I was still a baby, so I never got to meet him. But my grandpa says we look a lot alike. I don't remember what we were talking about when the doorbell rang. I got up to open the door, but before I could get to the door, it opened. Jimmy walked in, his mouth still open. A disconnected voice seemed to echo from Jimmy, almost as if he were speaking into a microphone. Can for you, the presidency will be the presidency. You like the presidency. You like human rights. You do human rights. Do the right for and you vote and you. Jimmy's mouth opened wider in a way that I can only describe as claymation. I remember screaming at the top of my lungs and stumbling backwards. My skin was hot with fear. I fell on my back clumsily, trying to retreat. Jimmy knelt down, got on all fours, and scurried like a beast towards me. You have my vote, I heard my grandpa shout behind me. Jimmy Carter stopped, completely still and motionless, as if my grandpa had a pause button. You have my vote. You have my vote. You have my vote. My grandpa repeated. Jimmy stood up and began to mindlessly shuffle around the house. His stare became vacant and he bounced off the walls like he didn't see where he was going. After he made a couple laps around the house, he walked to the front door and began to repeatedly open and close it very slowly. As I got lost staring at Jimmy Carter, my grandpa's loud voice dug me out of my trance. Why the hell didn't you tell me you were being stalked by a president? He yelled. This is the second time I saw him. And how am I supposed to explain that without being told? I'm deeply disturbed. Because this has happened before. Damn it, my grandpa said. Wait, what? What do you mean? My hairs started to stand up my grandpa's side. In November 1963, the president came knocking on our door. I was about 11 years old at the time. My mom, your great-grandmother, answered a knocking at the door, and standing there was John F. Kennedy. The way he spoke, acted, and looked, you would have never thought that wasn't the president. He just looked and acted like the real deal, you know? My mom let him in, and they talked for about an hour. He told her that he was knocking on random people's doors to have a more personal relationship with his fellow Americans. My mom ate that up. Eventually, he asked her if he could take me to meet Jackie. Even as a kid, I remember thinking, where's the Secret Service? Where's the black limo outside? But I guess she was just so enamored with the idea of me meeting the president and his family. She agreed. He led me out of the home, one hand on the base of my neck. He didn't talk to me. If I struggled even a little, his grip tightened. We went into the woods where he spoke to me for the first time. He asked, Do I have your vote? I was so scared, all I could say was, yes. His mouth opened impossibly wide, his teeth folded back, and his tongue slithered down his throat. I remember thinking, oh, God, this is how I'm going to die. Then a hole blew through his neck. Kennedy raised his arms up under his chin and swayed in pain. Then a hole exploded through his head, and he collapsed in a chair that did not exist. I waited for him to move before I ran away. I don't know why. When I got back to the house, my mom was in tears. The president, the real president, had been killed. My mom and I never spoke about that day again. Since then, your father has been stalked by Lyndon B. Johnson, Nixon, and Reagan. I don't know if the president killed your father, but if I had to guess, I would say it was Reagan. It was trickier as Reagan. My face must have telegraphed how insane I thought this all was, because my grandpa immediately said, "If you see the president, just tell it that it has your vote. Now, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to get ready for bed." But it's only 3 p.m., Grandpa. Don't forget to grab. Oh, don't forget to grab Carter on your way out. Just leave him on the porch. I'll be fine, Grandpa said just before he closed his bedroom door. I walked up to Jimmy, grabbed him by the arm, and led him out of the house. I left him on the porch just as Grandpa instructed. Jimmy remained motionless, with his mouth open. Since then, I've only had one close call with Jimmy. I woke up to the sensation of slick moisture on my fingers one night, and when I looked over to investigate, I saw Jimmy had half my arm down his throat. He was swallowing me whole like a snake. I screamed, "You have my vote! You have my vote! You have my vote!" I felt his throat muscles squeeze my arm out of him. My arm was covered in foul-smelling saliva. Jimmy mindlessly, what's that? Wandered out of my home, and I remember to lock my doors and window every night and day now. I wonder if Jimmy will stalk me forever, or if I'll be so focused on Jimmy that I won't see Clinton behind me. Dun, dun, dun! I'll see you tomorrow night for another twisted tale. This was by RobotVampire on Reddit No Sleep. What a great story. Some great questions in the comments from them. If you guys find particularly great horror content, sick, twisted garbage that you want me to read, I'm ready for you.